In part three of our look at the changing metro order in the post-World War II era, we're going to look at the emerging global economy. And the emerging global economy picks up as a product of deindustrialization. And this idea that was presented in the chapter, that capitalism spread its tentacles in that vein of Karl Marx, how profit-seeking capitalists are going to scour the world in order to produce at the lowest cost. And we see that as deindustrialization occurred in our former sites of manufacturing, again, primarily in the Northeastern and Great Lakes regions of the United States, and also in Western Europe. We saw how multinational corporations come together and they create this single economic unit. So cities are no longer local or regional employment bases, sites of production. We now see that our global economy, cities and economies and countries around the world are working more as a single unit than ever before. So we're finding the evolution of an international urban system where multinational corporations control sites of production, distribution of goods, meeting demand in consumer markets. Oftentimes, the headquarters, the executives for multinational corporations are located in North America and in Western Europe, but the sites of production now are found in Asia, South Asia, East Asia, even closer to home in places like Mexico, where again, capitalism is spreading its tentacles and finding these sites of production that are locations where goods can be produced at a much lower cost because of the low cost of labor. And in the late 20th century, telecommunications evolved to the point where this was possible. So now multinational corporations could connect thousands of miles away with their sites of production in an instant through telephone technology, through internet technology. We're now able to find these connections. This advancement in telecom compresses space. As a result of this, we find that our boom and bust cycles are greater, they're more frequent, and if one part of the world fails, we see that domino effect go through the rest of the world. We saw it with the 2008 market collapse, where we were so integrated and interdependent on other economies that a ripple, a hiccup in one part of the world creates that domino effect that goes around the world. We find that if consumer demand in North America and Western Europe declines, that jobs in South and East Asia at sites of production are also going to decline. So we find again this boom and bust cycle that is related to this single economic unit. We recognize that as deindustrialization occurred in North America and Western Europe, urbanization skyrocketed in Asia and Africa, in parts of Latin America. So as this deindustrialization and recreation of our metro order was underway, we saw the rapid ascension in Asia and Africa and also Latin America. So as capitalism spread its tentacles, we began to see what are known as agglomerations or clusters grow in different parts of the world. In the 1960s, what's known as the Asian tigers began to take off, and this was Taiwan, Hong Kong, South Korea, Singapore. These countries in this era were guided by neoliberal trade principles, policies that were guided by their governments to make sure that they attracted multinational corporations from around the world to select them as sites of production. So again, in the 1960s through the end of the century, we saw these countries take off. We saw that Japan became a new model for capitalism. Again, a model for capitalism that connected close government relationships with the market, with industry. Hong Kong became a center of finance, and a lot of the new ventures that started to grow in Asia were financed through Hong Kong financiers. Hong Kong during this time was property of England through the 1997. China began to practice what's known as market Leninism, which is a strongly controlled version of capitalism. The government, again, is a communist government, and it tightly controlled the different opportunities that China had to engage with the global economy. China adopted this market Leninism. The Shenzhen region became what's known as a special economic zone. While most of China remains closed off, Shenzhen and a couple other cities opened up. They intentionally targeted these metro areas to attract foreign investment, to take advantage of cheap labor, to produce goods in these metro areas. Over time, from 1979 to 2013, the Pearl River Delta megalopolis evolved. This megalopolis, which is a cluster of cities, a collection of cities that are closely interconnected and interdependent, grew from 100,000 people in 1979 to over 10 million today. That type of growth is unheard of. It's profound. Again, this was the result of closely managed economic integration into the global economy. Here's a picture of the Pearl River Delta, and you can see a series of cities, not just one, but a series of cities that are now connected. Shenzhen is the second city from the bottom right, north of Hong Kong, and that city itself has over 10 million people. So when we look at this entire megalopolis, we're looking at well over 100 million people in this region. Again, this part of China was targeted as a special economic zone to allow outside investment to enter China and take advantage of its low-cost labor. Again, the communist government controlled this tightly so that any further integration, any spread beyond Shenzhen, beyond the Pearl River Delta, was managed by the communist government. So this 1978 open door policy, which evolved after Mao Zedong died, who promoted a very strict communist agrarian-based lifestyle. This open door policy led to the transformation of this part of China. And you can see the growth of population in these cities. Shenzhen, again, expected to be upwards of 15 million by 2030. Guangzhou, over 15 million. Xiamen, over 1.5 million. This part of the world is rapidly urbanizing and industrializing. So today, there's over 117 million people in this megalopolis. A second area of focus is Mexico. And the Mexican economy really benefited from NAFTA in 1994, which was recently replaced with the USMCA trade agreement. But again, like multinational corporations targeting China to take advantage of cheap labor, produce goods, and then ship them back, many companies found Mexico to be an ideal location. While the prevailing wages in Mexico are higher than they are in China, they are far less than what you would find in the United States. So as the North American Free Trade Agreement took off, we were now able to produce goods in Mexico for American consumers and ship them back over the border without a tariff. This free trade agreement helped both the Mexican economy by providing jobs and also the American consumer, who were now able to acquire goods at a lower cost. NAFTA led to the evolution of what are known as borderplexes, cities that pop up on both sides of the U.S.-Mexican border. Now, these borderplexes have become areas of concern when we look at traffic funneling through a checkpoint, when we look at pollution from all of the automobile and factory production sites that sit on the borderplex, when we look at the movement of people across the border and some of the security and immigration concerns that are present at any border crossing. But these border plexes, on the other hand, have created tremendous economic opportunities on both sides of the border. The graphic on the top of your screen shows some of the benefits that we receive, including oil imports, including lower consumer prices for food, automobiles, clothing. Again, this free trade agreement has created economic prosperity on both sides, while there are absolutely some losses in jobs associated with deindustrialization, but we see that consumer spending has improved. We see that economic opportunities in Mexico have improved. We see that a metro region has evolved into what's called a borderplex, the metropolis growing on both sides of an international border. Maquiladoras are factories, assembly plants, sites of production, and you can see in this map all of these different borderplex communities in the locations of these maquiladoras. So you'll notice in Texas, you have El Paso and Ciudad Juarez. Ciudad Juarez has a number of different maquiladoras. The image or the list on the right shows all these different multinational corporations that produce in Mexico at these assembly plants and then ship the goods back into North America. Fisher Price, toys. Ford, automobiles. JVC, audio and video components. Volkswagen, Toshiba, Samsung, all of these ubiquitous common brands that we find across our consumer demand, right? Food, automobiles, electronics, toys. They're produced in Mexico and sent back. And again, the reason why, the prevailing wage at these maquiladoras in Mexico is under $5 a day, whereas similar jobs in the United States would pay over $20 an hour. So we start to better understand how deindustrialization led to sites of production being established elsewhere. And then our third location is Bangladesh. The map on the right-hand side of your screen, you see these different agglomerations. And the primary agglomerations in Bangladesh, in Chittagong, and also the capital of Dhaka, is the garment industry. The garment industry works because it is relatively a low-cost business to set up. The technology is pretty common, relatively low cost. The labor used to produce garments is considered low-skilled or semi-skilled. So in Bangladesh, multinational corporations are able to take advantage of a workforce and able to take advantage of a low-cost workforce and pay their employees about $3 a day. Many of the employees in this industry are young women who move to the city to work in this garment production business. The garment production business has led to some shifts in Bangladesh. Again, it has furthered the industrialization and urbanization, particularly around Dhaka. It has created increasing economic opportunity, but at the same time, many of these women work in environments that would be deemed unsafe in the United States. So we run into some issues with the emerging global economy. One, we look at some of the job losses in the United States that go elsewhere. Another issue looks at some of the ethical concerns with creating overseas, where we say, yes, we'll take advantage of this low-cost labor. Part of the reason why the cost of labor is so low in other parts of the world is that the working conditions aren't up to the safety requirements that we would find here at home. So while the emerging global economy and industrialization in other countries has certainly helped the American consumer and the Western European consumer, and it has helped lead to the growth, the establishment, the expansion of cities and metropolitan areas around the world, we start to recognize that oftentimes these sites of production would not last in the United States, and that part of the reason why labor is so cheap is because of the lack of safety or environmental standards that are in play. So with that, we'll wrap up our look at Chapter 7, the changing metropolitan order in the post-World War II era.